a new theory of the firm.
So you get local ownership and control as you're promoting.
Yeah, we'd have to think about how you put it into the frame of a theory, but it fits very much with one of the pieces I'm going to bring up, that in terms of thinking about a theory of the firm, one
community, you mean? Thinking of the community.
Oh, well, okay. One of the things we're going to talk about today, and it's a thing I realized since we started at the last session, that developing a new theory of the firm, which is essentially subsidiary to the theory of a community, is a very, very important task of our moment. And you take the established theory of the firm, and one thing that has been popping out at me is it assumes that all firms are the same. Well, they not only have the wrong purpose, but it assumes they're all the same, and it ignores all these fundamentally important differences in the structure of the firm, most specifically ownership. So anyhow, there's so many pieces to this thing.
And, you know, Michael published a journal article of mine of grounding the theory of the firm in the natural sciences and human systems management a couple of years ago.
Yeah. Anyhow, I would love to have that conversation at some point. Trying to get my screen all set up here properly.
Just going to say good morning, Shan. Good morning, David.
Good morning, Michael.
Good morning, Erica. Can you hear me?
Oh, yeah. Hi, Michael.
Hey.
Good morning, Michael. And I've been chatting up Erica, and it reminded me I'll be in New York City on my way to my 55th reunion on May 30th, and I'm staying at 50 Park Avenue West, which is quite close to you.
All right. Yeah, shoot me an email again. When are you coming? May.
Wednesday, May. Arrive at about 11 o'clock on Wednesday morning, May 30th, and then I catch a bus up to Harvard Thursday morning.
All right. Let me know.
Okay.
Hey, Judy.
Hello. How are you?
Good, good, good. Yeah. Thanks for joining.
Oh, thank you for doing this. I love David.
Hi. Good to see you.
Hey, David. Hey, David.
This is, yeah, and there's Jesus.
Good morning.
Hi, David.
Hi. Gradually filling up the screen here.
Yes.
Little by little, a couple minutes to go.
So, Erica, I just want to share briefly. Somehow, David Wasarewski is not getting some of the emails from Eventbrite. I don't know others. Bill Veltrop, I think, is on now, who also said that they didn't get the login information.
Got this one.
So I am not sure what's happening with the Eventbrite and how that's operating, but we need to sort of possibly follow up.
Okay. Can you get an email off to everyone again quickly somehow?
No, I did this like several times. The problem is that either it hangs in the spam or it doesn't, or people sign up with a different email or something like that, or it may not even get there.
Okay.
But, that's just a logistical note for us to sort of
future. Okay. Okay.
Okay, everybody, I am recording. Just, I hope that's okay.
Great, and I'll mention that as well.
It's time to start. We have a few.
Yeah, it is.
Fewer people than I thought.
Time to start, but I think more will be coming in.
Yeah. Good.
So good morning, everyone. Welcome to our follow-up necessary conversation with David Korten. This is an initiative of the International Humanistic Management Association. It's something that we try to do regularly, and we're thrilled and honored for David to be joining us again today to follow up on the conversation we all began together back in February. This conversation is sponsored by the Donahue Center for Business Ethics and Social Responsibility at the University of Massachusetts Lowell, as well as at Fordham University and the Institute there for Humanistic Management. So, welcome again to everyone. We're going to dive right in. I know it's 11 on the dot, but I want to make sure we have time for really robust discussion as we did last time. Again, it's an initiative of the International Humanistic Management Association. The objectives, mission, values of this group we're a part of is really to protect dignity, to promote well-being, and really to advance flourishing across life, human species, and otherwise. We, again, have a variety of these types of initiatives, and please tune in to sorry, you can go online in the chat. I've put some information there. You can get to David's webpage to see the updated theory of, from a theory of the firm to a theory of community, as well as the IHMA website where you can sign up to see calendar invites. A reminder as we're getting started to please mute yourself on the left, bottom left. We also have the capability to mute all. If you have questions or remarks, comments, ideas as we're going through today, please put them in the chat. And then when we're going into discussion, I'll moderate through the chat. And we'll try to get to as many as we possibly can, again, for that robust discussion. The goal here is to dive deep. It's a follow-up. Many of you, I think, were on the last call. So welcome back. I know some of you wanted to be on the last call and are able to make this one. So I'll bring you up to speed very briefly from that last call. As far as general framework, I'll provide, again, a brief introduction. We'll recap the foundational premise and organizing principles from the last call. Then we turn to David, who will take us through some of his newer thinking since our call together, how it's evolved, and then we'll have time for discussion. And we'll wrap up today with what we hope is a really concrete opportunity to continue to develop and move ideas forward. We'll brainstorm and mind map. We have an idea for a book to actually give a platform for these types of ideas as we're all generating them to contribute to, again, ideas related to alternative theories of the firm and really this idea of community as well. Okay, I think we're ready to go then. In that case, I will just quickly bring you up to speed from our last call. The idea, of course, is that the theory of the firm dominated our contemporary socioeconomic thinking, and the premise is that the continuation of our conversation today is that the narrative, of course, is fatally flawed, and David will talk much more eloquently on that than I just have. But this idea that humanity faces a massively complex set of organizational challenges, it threatens our own future as a human species and other life forms as well. The spirit of today is really to tap into and amplify our creative energies as faculty members. I think most of us are in business school context, maybe others as well. But ideally, we're trying to advance beyond where theory is and really begin to think about how we can develop other alternative theories and ultimately institutional structures to support more flourishing for all of us. So a theory of the community has been one conceptual trajectory to advance our understanding, and this is to paraphrase from the most recent document on David's website, but how life organizes our human nature and possible contributions to move toward a more viable, prosperous, and fulfilling human future. That's our goal in this conversation today as well. So let me just quickly put up on the screen the slide deck that we had from last time. Whoops, are you all there? I think you're all with me, good. So let me just switch to the deck for 1 second. I'll bring this up. I think you're all able to see this at this point. We started last time with a foundational premise for a theory of community, that life exists only in multi-species communities that self-organization to create and maintain the conditions essential to their existence. We humans are living beings, and we exist only as members of multi-species living communities. Let me just click forward. There were 3 foundational organizing principles, and these have since been developed further in the work David's done over the last month and a half or so. But principle 1, life must be the defining value, and the community must be the defining unit of organization. Principle 2, communities must self-govern as radically self-organizing hierarchies, applying the organizing principle of subsidiarity. And principle 3, each community must strive for local material self-reliance and providing a full, healthy, happy life for all of its members. So I'm not going to go into the details of those principles because I think we'll get there in this conversation. With that, let me just shift back. I hope to not sharing and I can see all of you again, but so far I can't. Are you seeing my screen? I'm sorry if that's what you're seeing. Stop share. Here we go. Great, and we're back. So at this point, again, welcome. Please mute yourself if you've not already done so. Please put remarks in the chat box, and I will turn it over to David.
Thank you, Erica. That's a beautiful introduction, and I really can't express how excited I am about the process that you folks have put together here. It's been a long time since I've been a part of academia as such, and I do not recall any experience in academia with a group of wonderful minds like this coming together to address such an important common challenge, free of egos, but trying to really push the frontiers of thought. Now, the starting point for everything I do is this recognition that we live in a world in deep crisis, that, so deep that it threatens the viability of the human species and the ability of Earth to support life. So that does, as Erica mentioned, create a tremendously complicated organizational challenge. Now, one of the fundamental recognitions underlying what we're doing here is recognizing the distinctive nature of our species, the extent to which we organize around our shared narratives or stories, and what we're calling here a theory. Basically a theory is a story explaining some aspect of our assumptions about some aspect of our experience. And as we're seeing here, as we play this out, we currently have our stories terribly wrong. It's not just the theory of the firm, but the fallacies in the theory of the firm are also grounded in a much deeper set of cosmological assumptions and assumptions about our nature as humans. So, we have to go where humanity has never been before, and it is not going to get there through the ideas of any one individual. It's going to take enormous collaborative intellectual activities like what we're engaged in here. Now, I just want to go back. The foundational premise of what we're talking about here is that complex life exists only in multi-species communities that self-organize to create and maintain the conditions essential to their own existence. And within that, recognizing that we humans are living beings, and therefore we exist only as members of multi-species living communities. And I'd be interested in your take on this, but my impression is that there is absolutely nothing that we teach in business or economics that reflects a recognition of that foundational reality. And that takes us to the depth of the problem. Now, one one of the things so exciting to me about this process, it forces me to put all my former ideas into a more coherent framework, but it's also pushing me to think further. And even waking up this morning with new things that I will roughly bring in. Now, I've gotten a little further also in my understanding of how limited the theory of the firm is, and I realize if you look at that frame closely, it's only claiming to explain how firms make decisions based on assumptions that are based on the assumption that the sole purpose of the firm is to maximize profit. Now, the other kind of is not new understanding, but trying to work this in is that the ways in which the theory of the firm connects in with the underlying premise of, well, we used to call it neoliberal economics. I think of it, it's either neoliberal ideology, or you can think of it as a faith-based religion. That the idea that society is best served when individuals behave like psychopaths and corporations act like mafia. Now, another piece that is critical in our subsequent discussions, Michael brought up the term Occam's razor. I don't know if I've got the pronunciation right, but the push, and I think this is much broader in academia, the idea that you want to come to the simplest possible explanation, the simplest possible theory. Now, that almost assures a limitation of our ability to understand complex living systems. Now, and I'll talk in a minute about the larger frame of that. But another key development is that I realize that we not only need a theory of community as kind of an overarching organizational framework, we also need a new theory of the firm that begins with the fundamental premises of the theory of community, but then applies them to our understanding of the firm and its role. Another piece that is coming more to the forefront of my thinking relates to our whole thinking about an understanding of human rights and freedoms, which of course has been particularly foundational to our sort of political ideologies in the United States. And as you get into trying to get a deeper organizational understanding of how life organizes, you begin to realize that there is, within that reality, there's no freedom without responsibility. And that within a community framework, recognizing that we meet our needs in community by contributing to the ability of the whole to meet its needs, including the systems and need for continuous adaptation and creative evolution. And that again takes us into deeper questions of how our overall culture thinks about individuals in relationship to community. Now, a good deal of my current work gets into a framing that I haven't brought into either of these papers, but it frames the deeper shift in human understanding and organization of which I see our work as a part. The first large frame is the transition, or the emergence of what we call a new or second enlightenment. Another way to think about it is the transition from the 18th century enlightenment or understanding to a 21st century enlightenment. And we don't have time to go into this in depth, but I'll just touch on it. I think you'll recognize quickly that this is an advance in fundamental framework from trying to understand the whole of reality in terms of mechanism, to thinking of reality in terms of self-organizing organisms, which is a totally different kind of mental frame. And of course, part of, again, this comes back to the extent that in the ways in which we as humans organize our lives, our communities, everything around the mental frames in our mind. But this shift from a 18th to 21st century enlightenment is from mechanism to organism, from a static universe to an evolving universe, from a focus on individual parts or elements to inseparable wholes, in which the primary concern or the primary variable is the relationships, not the individuals. The 18th century Enlightenment was about dualism, the separation of mind and matter, which led us as a species, or, at least in Western civilization, which we then spread out to the world, the focus on mind over matter, humans over nature. And now we're shifting to an understanding of the inseparable unity of mind and matter and of humans and nature. And this is coming into both the physical and biological sciences in ways that are very exciting if you're on the frontier. Now, the other piece comes out of discussions and ideas that have much of their origin actually in China, and is the frame of an ecological civilization. And I think of it as the transition from the imperial civilization of the past 5,000 human years to the ecological civilization that has to define our future. And again, I see all these things that we're discussing as integral to that frame. And this shift to an ecological civilization is deeply grounded in this new emerging understanding of the new Enlightenment, which in very interesting ways also traces back to traditional, deep traditional Chinese understanding and philosophy. But of course, what we're moving into goes beyond in terms of its complexity, beyond anything we could identify in human thought earlier. And it all comes together around the need to move as a species to where no humans have ever been before. Kind of the intellectual frameworks, the organizing frameworks, and so forth that are totally unique. So this brings us to the need for a theory of community, drawing on emerging lessons, particularly from biological sciences, on the organizing processes by which living systems continually adapt and evolve. It also needs to bring in a much deeper understanding of how we as humans can learn to self-organize in the ways that nature self-organizes. And as we push that based on understandings coming out of the biological sciences, we begin to see that living systems, from our individual bodies, other complex organisms, or Earth itself, the organization is from the bottom up. There is nothing, at least that I've seen identified, that has any resemblance to the command and control structures that tend to dominate our organizational frames. and that is deeply significant, and it's a very, very major part of the organizational challenge we face. Now, that new frame brings us also to what I previously mentioned briefly, recognizing the mutual responsibilities and obligations of individuals and communities to each other. And partly recognizing that, in our bodies, every cell is organizing as if it recognizes both its individuality and the importance of its individuality to the whole of the body, but at the same recognizing that it as an individual cannot exist without the body. So you've got that interplay. And I think we're beginning to see also metaphorically in terms of how Earth organizes as a living community, that pretty much every species is not only dependent on that larger structure, but it is also performing some function that is important to and contributes to the community. So it begins to lead us into this, this two-way flow in the community. Now, all of this brings us to the need for, not to do away with the firm. The firm is part of our organizing frame of humanity, but we need a totally new theory that frames the firm as a community institution and thereby subordinate and accountable to the community. So we need a theory that provides a guide to restructuring firms as institutions through which groups of people or communities of people in nature meet their needs through service to the community. So it's a two-way relationship. The firm as an institutional intermediary between individuals and the larger community. And it requires, in terms of firms that are in the market, organizations that are in the market, a profit is probably an essential piece of that and a natural piece of it, but would bring us into the frame of a fair profit, which is adequate to meet the needs, the essential needs of the firm and its stakeholders, but is also, our evaluation of the firm's performance also includes its reciprocal contribution to the community. And I'm just beginning to struggle with how we even think about that. But it's one of the things I just wanted to put on the table. Now, the other thing that has really jumped out at me that the theory of the firm completely ignores is the extraordinary variety of firms, of businesses, from the local to the national to the global, to those that are organized as individual proprietorships, where they're totally the function of an individual or an individual family, to a massive global corporation that is owned by, that its ownership is defined by purely by the share markets or by some sort of private equity fund in a pyramid of corporate ownership. It's just an almost infinite variety of arrangements with an infinite variety of implications, which we need to sort out as we're trying to figure out what is the appropriate role of the firm. And one of the things I've come to feel very strongly is that, particularly for corporations, since they are creations of government, thereby creations of society, creations of the community, there is absolutely no justification, moral or logical, for a purely private purpose corporation, which would be the purely profit driven for the largest shareholder financial benefit It's a totally illegitimate institutional form within that frame. So these are things that all would need to be sorted out. And as I was thinking about this, this is of course not new, but the frame of the publicly traded limited liability corporation takes an organization that has increasing global power, and it systematically strips away any human moral sensibility or sense of responsibility or morality. And my thinking over time on that set of issues has been very much influenced by simply two conversations. One of them was with one of the founders of Odwalla, the juice company now owned by Coca-Cola. But I was talking with one of the original founders back in some of our earlier conversations on these issues, and he said, you know, when we founded Odwalla, our mission, our business purpose was to provide affordable, healthy juices to people, to make those available. He said, once we went public, from then on, we were in the business of making money. A total shift in the whole orientation of the organization. There was another powerful moment. Quite some years ago, I was at Esalen. I assume most of you know the Esalen Institute in California, with Ray Anderson, who was the CEO of Interface, the carpet company, which is often held up as an example of what corporations can do in terms of responsibility. So I was with Esalen with Ray, and we happened to be sitting naked together in the hot tub, which is a kind of an intimate moment. And I asked Ray, I said, you know, how is this? I operate with the theory that what you do with Interface is impossible to do with a publicly traded corporation. And you seem to be proving my theory wrong. What's your take on that? And he says, oh no, he says, your basic analysis is absolutely right on. He says, you have to understand the actual structure of Interface. That if we were a standard publicly traded corporation, there's no way I could do what I do. What allows me to do it is that we have two classes of shares. Only one has voting rights, and I control the voting rights. So he was therefore able to apply his personal humanhood, his morality, and his sense of desire to serve the community in framing the direction of this corporation, but very aware that it depended on those conditions. And this was one thing that troubled me for a long time, because the Interface has for so long been held up as an example. Oh, you can do all these things with a publicly traded corporation. Anyhow, these are all things that our theory of the firm needs to bring in. So I have talked rather longer than I had intended to, because the real purpose of this meeting is to throw this open to get reflections of others and to discuss where individually and as a group we want to take this exploration. So Erica, back to you.
Yes, thank you, David. So please, in the chat box, if you have questions or remarks or points of discussion you'd like to raise, I will moderate our discussion from there. And I'll just start. It looks like there was a little bit of energy around this idea of benefit corporations as perhaps meeting the requirements of this new theory of a firm. So let's see, I think it's Elaine. And then I know Linda was in on that conversation as well. Would either of you like to comment on that? Is that a direction we should be thinking about for this new theory of the firm? Is that really a new theory? Please join in if you'd like.
Okay. Yes, I've been studying the Benefit Corporation for a while, and it seems to me that they attempt to actually come up with a set of criteria that are then judged by an independent body is a very promising avenue. And if you look at the fact that the B Corps have jumped from just a few 4 or 5 years ago to about almost 3,000 or 2,500 in the world now, that attempts the readiness. And I'm French, and the French are thinking of a change in status of at least to allow mission-driven organizations to be looked at differently. I don't know how far it would go, but it seems to be spreading, and I think that's a good sign. And that's what I wanted to say. So looking at these criteria, which include a number of stakeholders, not just the stockholders, is a promising avenue.
I just want to throw in quickly here. I haven't looked at this for a while, but I used to be very aware that most benefit corporations were not publicly traded, so they had that rooted ownership. The other thing is the question of there's different benefit corporation plans. Most of the ones I'm familiar with only, in a sense, allow the corporation to be beneficial to the society. And I think as we go forward, if we recognize that there's no legitimate reason for government to assign that privilege of being a corporation unless it has a clear public purpose, that we need to make that needs to be a requirement.
There are some public, thank you. There are some public corporations attempting at least to be, like Unilever is one, because they acquired a number of but I don't know that they will succeed. But that's what they intend to do, they say. And Danone in France could follow the same path. We don't know, but there's some steering on the edges here.
If you have any input there, you might suggest that part of fulfilling that vision would be to somehow transform their ownership structure.
Yes, definitely.
So I want to make sure Chintan has an opportunity, because I think Chintan is working on a dissertation or doctoral work right now, and is interested in how to empirically think about this theory of community. So Chintan, would you like to make some remarks or pose some questions to this group?
Sure. Hi, everyone. So I have been following this intentional community since last 2 years that is based in southern part of India and composed of citizens from 45 different countries. The current population of around 3,000 people. And they recently celebrated their 50th anniversary. So it is a serious project that is going on. And what I saw from the three principles and the sub-points that you mentioned, they seem to very appropriately fit the community. Now, currently, I am studying them as a novel form of organization. So from the org design perspective, and if there is something new into it. But I would really like to explore and maybe work very closely on providing this empirical evidence to this theory of community. Because I mean, we have, and then I have access to their archival data, I have access to their governance systems, and how they have the selection mechanism and not an election mechanism, how their businesses are incorporated and for the community. And it's not a gated community, so they are pretty much open to the outside world as well, and highly structured in a good way in the important things. So in terms of infrastructure and technology, in terms of design and architecture, they are pretty good, pretty above the Indian standards, I have to say.
Sounds very exciting. One of the I mean, key part of the process is learning in every way we can from experiments like that seem to be aligned with where we need to go as a species. So what you're doing can be very helpful.
Okay, so is it possible to take this further and get in touch with you regarding this?
Yeah, surely. I mean, I would think that this would fit very nicely with the idea Michael wants to talk about in terms of an anthology, that making a contribution to that anthology that is trying to distill what are the principles, or what are the lessons learned out of this experience in India that have potential broader application.
Okay, thank you.
And also an opportunity too, the International Humanistic Management Association has a gathering of a PhD network. So please bring your project wherever you are in that stage to that group as well. I think you'll get some great feedback and support there too.
Yes, I'll do that. I'll write your mail on that. Thank you.
Shen, I know you had some ideas you wanted to share with David and with others. And welcome again from the middle of your night in Australia.
Oh, thank you, Erica. The comment about B corporations, they mean well, but they do bad because they're still command and control hierarchies. And as David pointed out, it's only enabling. It doesn't mean they actually do anything. So I see it as greenwash. And I don't think they're going to go anywhere. It's a fad. It's a fashion. In fact, there's no need in Australia, at least, to change the law to have that. It just makes people feel good. In America, there's a number of states that have been promoting it. Directors have a duty to look after the corporation as a whole, and that includes their stakeholders as well as their shareholders. The idea of the superiority that corporations are formed to make a profit is not in the law. And even in America, it's in common law in America, law practice, but in Australia and England, the law does not say you form a corporation to make a profit, because a lot of corporations are charities. We don't have the charity law like you do in the 501c3s. It's the same corporation. And we have corporations without shares. There are professional associations, the Institute of Company Directors. And so there's nothing in the law which forces you to make a profit. And if you're looking for the sort of vision that David's looking for, you've got to follow the architecture of nature and have multiple decision-making centers. What Michael Pearson and I have been talking about, network governance, and you find that in the worker cooperatives in Spain and the John Lewis Partnership in England and Visa International in America. So there's nothing against the law for creating network governance, and that's where you can get distributive power, and that's where you can start getting the community involved, so that everybody in the community acquires over time ownership and voting rights of any firm. That's enough.
Great. Would anyone else like to chime in at this point? You can just unmute yourself, as long as we don't have a huge number at the same time, and we can just be respectful of everybody's time.
Alan here?
Things that really resonate, things that you're struggling with. Hi, Alan. Nice to see
Alan,
you.
hello. Good to see you.
Is that a gesture that you want to make a comment?
Yeah, a quick comment I'd like to make.
Hello, Alan.
Hello, yeah, good to see you, Shan. Many moons have passed, indeed. I think that's called aging.
Yes.
Last I checked. Yeah, well, my comment is, it's fairly straightforward, but I think essential, I hope. That is, as several on this call know, I and many colleagues, David included, have been at this purpose of the corporation work for many, many years. Back in 2004, 2005, we launched Corporation 2020 and did some, interesting work, research forums for about 8-9 years. I and perhaps our friend from France, Alain, others have been part of the Purpose of the Corporation project in Europe, led by a group in the Czech Republic. So the questions on the table have been around, and the frustration, certainly for me, has been growing. And I think one of the ways forward, so that we don't have a conversation as we're having today, 10 years from now, without progress, is to recognize that this struggle transcends the business community and those who are part of it, those who spend their time on corporate governance and corporate purpose and so forth. As we listen to David's opening remarks, we hear words like ecology, like human rights, and I would add any number of other domains, indigenous peoples, gender, equality, and so forth. So I think going forward with this group, I would urge that alliances with not so massively complex that it becomes paralyzed, but certainly outreach and alliances with leaders in these other movements that the business community so occasionally intersects with, occasionally nods to human rights, for example, indigenous rights, these kinds of issues, ecofeminism. This is a common struggle. And I don't think we're going to see progress on the immediate issue we're talking about here, that is corporate transformation, and activating the concept of the corporation as part of the larger community, seeing all these linkages without ourselves linking to these other comrades out there whose lives affect corporations and whose lives are affected by corporation, and the corporations affect those lives, maybe in whatever movements they happen to be in. So that's my proposition and hope.
Those are beautiful thoughts, and I really appreciate it. I think we're all benefiting from this conversation again. But given our time constraints here, I wanted to see maybe if we could build on those comments that you just made and synthesize this into sort of the next steps to have avenues for furthering this conversation some more. One of the ways we can think about this, perhaps logistically or practically, would be through Michael's suggestion of this book on the alternatives to the theory of the firm. So if we could maybe think about some ways that we could move this conversation forward into something that could be visible in print, I think maybe that should be the next phase of this discussion. Michael, do you want to mention something about the book proposal?
Well, I mean, this was just one of the ways that I think we can channel potential further conversations on this. And Alan, as you were sort of pointing out, I think the challenge you're throwing out there is important. We don't have that much time. So what can we do in the various individual forms or in these various subgroups, I think is important, and that we're connected is also important. And Alan, you are part of this We All group. And I think it's important that everybody here may know that there are attempts to bring and bridge different various groups with similar intentions together. There probably need to be more. I don't know how we can do this better, but part of the International Humanistic Management Association, we're trying to push this forward. I'm sure that there are many people on the call that are also representing certain institutions that can help push us forward. Judy and Mary are part of the Academy of Management MSR group that we're connected with. So we want to push it in the academic domain to some degree. That's certainly a very long shot, long-term kind of project, but I think that's missing in many ways. We don't have the intellectual architecture. That's why we're going around in circles also about the B Corp and the other kinds of things. And so Shan, your work and other people's work, I think is critical stepping stone for us to just be able to get a new blueprint. And that's what one of the ideas was: how can we already just sort of assemble current thoughts on rethinking the theory of the firm? And so it's an invitation for everybody that has thought about this in a longer or more deeper way to just bring these thoughts together as a basic state-of-the-art attempt. And then, of course, that's not in itself enough. It's sort of, I think, David Korten, as we were talking, it's sort of part of an ongoing conversation. It needs to be an ongoing conversation that spreads out into the various channels. how can we do that? I mean, we have a journal, it's called the Humanistic Management Journal, so maybe some of the better ideas can sort of be part of a special issue. This is very pragmatically thinking, but for academics, this is possibly helpful. There are probably better channels to sort of distribute that. So I'm just throwing it out there for whoever else has ideas, but I wanted to make sure that everybody knows that there is this possibility and that we're working towards this edited volume. We're going to send out a call for papers soon, if that's okay. And if you have a thought about these and contributions and think you want to make some contribution there, that'd be fantastic. Similarly, with a special issue, the Academy of Management provides a couple of slots for us where we are discussing this further. And so this is just the next steps in terms until August, possibly. But I'm sure that other people have better ideas or additional ideas. So just to sort of channel them might be good.
It was, this conversation's already sparked what in a way is a fundamentally new insight for me. You know, I've been kind of fascinated as we got into this by recollections of various theoretical frameworks of the organizing by territorial units versus functional units. But my sense of, you know, the community we're talking about is a place-based community of people and nature, which is the foundational way we need to organize as a global species. But then within that, we have, as people have been pointing out, it's not just we have nonprofits, we have all sorts of, you know, government units, individual organizations that need to be managed, but they all need to be managed within the frame of communities. So the theory of the firm assumes that the only organizations we're concerned with are ones that are profit oriented and oriented to maximizing profit. And maybe what we're talking about here is a theory that's much broader than the firm. It's, and I don't even know what the name is, but it's the organizational units within community, which can't involve input from all members of the community. Imagine trying to have a board meeting with 7 billion people. But we have to break it down into smaller units. But how do we think about those smaller units? And somehow that's the theory that we may be struggling with here.
Yes. Do you want to go, Sean?
Yeah, is that okay? David, I think you said it. It's not a theory of a firm you're looking for. It's a theory of organizations. And you've already explained the nested holons. So you're looking for holonic architecture or holarchy. So I think you've already got the answer.
Partly, the holarchy would be a holarchy of territorially based organizations. So that would be an absolute fundamental thing in terms of the governmental or overall governance framework.
Yes, there'd be a net.
What about those smaller units in which groups of people come together to address a particular need or purpose as an individual organization within that?
I agree. You'd have networks. Visa International, for instance, it has hundreds of boards. Each one has absolute power over one geography, which is a bank, or one function. Yeah. And they have, and everybody. And that's the way you reduce information overload by delegating it down, as you said, the principal subsidiary function to the lowest possible level. So they have networks, just like the brain. Different parts of the brain makes different decisions according to the environmental and physiological needs. And the various communities in the brain compete with each other according to what is further the well-being and survival of the biota, which happen to be human or any other sort of thing. So the design of the brain is what I call ecological governance. It has distributed decision-making, distributed intelligence. One can take over and substitute for the other. And it's only by network governance that you can get self-regulation and self-governance. And I can share some writings for that, including those with Michael, which developed this. But talking to Michael's point, how do you progress it? I've been trying to do it in the political sphere of trying to show politicians how they can promote, get elected by showing people how they can get a bit of the action of corporations by giving tax deductions on condition that the ownership, that for-profit firms distribute their ownership widely to the voters in their geographic region. That's another topic that we can develop offline later, I think.
Interesting. I want to make sure Bill has a chance. It looks like you might want to chime in here. Please do.
How very perceptive of you, Erica. Yeah, I'd like to riff just a bit here. First of all, I think that we are much more enmeshed in the language and the thinking of the empire era than we can possibly know. And so it's very, very difficult to get out of that, that entanglement. So I notice that a lot of the focus is on structures, and indeed the structures that have been created and layered on top of each other are the source of all of our difficulties. But we're not going to get above them by focusing on trying to improve them. So we need a different starting point. And I think the different starting point is the infinite game we see throughout the rest of nature. So the examples of the mind and how it works is, is a great fit here. David's focus on the community as a key unit, place-based, is really crucial. My friend Alan's comments about we need to learn how to not just collaborate between institutions, but learn how to tap into the synergy that exists when they really are supporting each other in multiplying their contributions. So I represent a field of work called systemic change. So I've spent 45 years doing that. Alain has done that as well. We tend not to write. And we tend to find that we have a choice. We could write about things or we can do things. And so there's a very strong gap between the world of academia and the world of people who have actually changed systems. And it's a very messy business, and it's increasingly needing to look like what we're seeing throughout the rest of nature. So our systems are not designed to become wise. They're not designed even to learn, much less, and not designed to collaborate, much less to seek the synergy. Mm-hmm. So I would love to explore how we bridge, how we tap into the synergy that's implicit in the white spaces between the people that are on this Zoom call. So there's several folks that, I really want to connect with. And from what just from the comments, but I think all of us have something to contribute. We can move into action on an anthology, and that would be a good thing to do probably from some reasons, but I don't think that moves us toward what I think the world needs. And the world needs for us to begin to think of our organizations as living systems with the potential to become generative living organisms at all levels. And what Alain and I have been working on is what that looks like, how that strategy might unfold. So we have a lot of thinking, but not much good writing. And what I'd love is to be connected with the people who are good at researching and writing, etc., and to really look at how we can help support each other, multiply the contribution we need to make, because unless our existing systems of all kinds, find it in their self-interest to undergo the journey of metamorphosis. And it's a fundamental metamorphosis, not tearing down the structures, but simply understanding the ways in which the existing structures are retarding their ability to consciously evolve in ways that are caring. And we know how to start doing that. And we know how to start doing it in a way that it will keep growing its ability to do that. But we can't reduce it to an elevator speech. So anyway, I've said enough for now.
Okay. Thank you. And by the way, exactly that is what I think we're hoping to provide, a platform for through something like an anthology with, absolutely, that is not enough. That is just scratching the surface. But I think for those of us on this call, we want to be system changers, and we're also in this career. So how can we edge our way in that direction, because we know the world needs it. So that's exactly why we'd like to move forward this proposal, a book proposal, to give different people in different domains of this academic world, of their world of practice, an opportunity to, how can we have conversations like this? What do we need to know? How can we be systems changers from whatever your expertise domain might be? I think that's a tremendous contribution potentially. So again, that's in part the spirit of this call, but really, I think we're all on board. So, and Michael, yes, I think you had wanted to.
Yeah. I just want to chime in. Yes, we don't know actually what people are doing professionally. So I think this is just an opening for us to sort of maybe harness the various strengths. And Bill, when you're saying you and Alan had worked on this, what would be a next step that you can possibly lead or co-lead or co-facilitate with people like that? We're just proposing something that we can easily or more easily do, because that's sort of a background, and I totally agree. But rather than sort of saying this is bad or this is good, let's try to see what multiple initiatives or vehicles can be used or developed. And if anybody can and is willing to take a lead on that, I think we're very willing to do whatever we can to facilitate or co-facilitate it. So this is just, I think we have 3 more minutes, but this is already a good step forward, I think, to have these conversations and just be thinking about this. So maybe offline, if people want to share their ideas or want to think a little bit about it, and just share it with Erica, myself, David, and David, in some way we can possibly help. But maybe some people here have already some specific ideas or activities that they're doing that help with that, what you're saying, Bill.
And again, as we're beginning to wrap up, and we can go a little beyond the noon if there are those of us who would like to stay on the call. But I want to make sure, David, you, Korten, have an opportunity. Is there something, a direction you would like to see this go in? Is there something you think this group can help you with? Is there an opportunity for us to continue this conversation with you? I just want to give you another minute or two to share with us how we can help you in your efforts and your thinking.
I sometimes reflect that my happiest moments in these conversations is when I don't feel any need to intervene, because I just love the direction in which the group is going, and it's an amazing process, and I find myself there right at the moment. I don't think I have anything right now to add, except just to let you know that I'm leaving with a recognition that what I've written on this so far, I need to completely rewrite around this, this deeper frame that I think is a major breakthrough. That it really is the units that organize by territory, which have to be the dominant units and part of the holarchy, versus the organizations that have a more functional purpose that's not tied to territory but needs to support the territorial processes and organizations. And I think if we can begin to break that out so that, and I don't know what we call it, but what we've been calling the theory of the firm, but recognize that we want something much larger, which goes beyond what we usually think of as a profit-oriented firm.
Great.
Erica, Alan White's been having a web page for 10 years of 2020. Might he like to use his web page as a way of discussion and developing this with practitioners?
Yeah, that site has been quiet for a couple of years now. We'd had a great run from 2005 approximately to 2012-13. We had a couple of large summits there, and it's still, the archives on the site are still, I think, really terrific. They're quite deep and rich if you poke around there. But it has been quiet. I've been diverted with other matters, other pressing matters.
Is that a yes or no that you'd like to use it to promote David's agenda? Because I've got another initiative on LinkedIn, trying to get the practitioners with the academics to define what they mean by sound governance in any sort of organization, because there's no agreement in academia and certainly not in practice. But I wouldn't want to interfere with what you're doing.
Quickly, one suggestion back to the anthology idea. It would be very, very unusual if, in structuring that anthology, rather than just an academic exercise, that each author proactively reached out to an activist, to a practitioner in whatever field is relevant. And I don't know if co-authoring is the way to describe it, but at least collaboration, such that the articles are not just about theory, but they're about activation as well. In other words, they have something to go toward, not just a session at the respective
Academy of Management
meetings.
No business school in the world teaches network governance. It's all command and control, and that you can't get bottom-up stakeholder involvement and geographic communities that way. So there's an intellectual black hole in academia, and they don't know it's there.
Wow. I just throw in here that part of this process, I mean, it's a huge process. So I wouldn't think of any of the suggested initiatives as exclusive or a choice between them. We need many, many initiatives that cut across an infinite variety of ways.
Or there's that $5 million challenge prize of how to make a new shape of governance of cooperation of the world to save us from existential risks to humanity that we mightn't exist for the end of this century. And that'll be announced in May. And that it'd be great if we could motivate them towards David's agenda.
Yeah, please don't refer to it as my agenda.
Oh, okay, our agenda.
Good.
Our agenda.
More consistent with what we're talking about.
Yeah.
Great. Well, again, I think our objective is really to turn this into action, not just conversation. The conversation's a starting point, and I think also very, very valuable. Michael, did you want to add anything else? I know David Wasilewski needs to head off the call. Please, if anyone else would like to make further comment or stay on, I can be here for another 10 or 15 minutes. But Michael, did you want to add anything?
No. I think the conversation is valuable action already. So I don't want to sort of see this as something that we undervalue. I think anybody else, I think we're on the call because we have a shared intention. So we'll just, I think, benefit from knowing about each other's work. And if people want to share it, and it'd be great either through the chat box or through emails. So it's an invitation, and maybe we have a chance to sort of reconvene at some point soon. I also have to leave, so I thank everybody who was on. Thank you, Erica. Thank you, David. Thanks, everyone.
And again, if you've been following the chat, this is recorded, and we'll make the recording available. And we will capture the chat box as well so that we can either respond or continue to engage in that. I think, David Korten, you've been so generous with your time and your thinking, as have all of you who've participated the last 2 sessions here. I think our intention, again, is to keep this conversation going to the extent that people are interested in it. So if there's someone who would like to make sure that that happens, please be in touch with me, and we can coordinate and continue to coordinate with David Korten, who I know is continuing now to develop this set of ideas. I'm just following the chat. It looks like